So, um, so I watched Candace Owens' video about George Floyd yesterday. And Miss Candace Owens said a lot about George and how she feels about George Floyd and all the things that she looked up about George Floyd. She's more than welcome to feel that way about the things that she found and things of that nature. But I need y'all to understand something. If you watch Candace Owens' video and you agree with her, I need you to grant me the same respect that I granted her and listen to me all the way through the way I listened to her video all the way through. Me and Candace Owens stand on different sides of the fence on a lot of things. But I've never hated Candace Owens. And the reason why is because I've always been able to empathize with her. I need black people to understand this. Black people, you have to start embracing your weirdo cousins. Your cousins that don't seem to be of the culture, your cousins who don't get it, who are not cool, that are a little corny, whatever, you gotta start embracing them. Because you are affecting them so negatively that they end up turning on you. Me and Candace are really different, but we both are kind of created the same way. When you're smart and educated and articulate and you try to live life, righteously, sometimes you just want to be embraced by the black community and you want them to hold you in high regard. And sometimes it just doesn't happen. Sometimes you feel like you do everything right. And instead of liking you, some black people like black people who push forward the worst stereotypes of us. And it makes you bitter. And in your time of bitterness, you end up not being around the community. You end up meeting some white people, and they put their arms around you. And they say, you know what? You're great. You're wonderful. There should be more black people like you. And then we hit a crossroads. This crossroads is where me and Candace split. Whenever people put their arms around Candace and say, you're wonderful, you're amazing, why aren't more black people like you? Candace said, you know what? I am great. You know what? I am amazing. More black people should be like me. And from now on, I'm going to criticize black people who aren't like me. Which is not the way she should have handled that. She should have handled it like me. But that's why I empathize with her. What I responded was, there are tons of black people like me. Maybe you should befriend more black people so you'll see there's more black people like me. But even though there's a lot of black people who aren't like me, that's okay, because black people are not a monolith. Part of being free is having the freedom to be however you want to be. So just because they aren't like me doesn't mean they're not just as good, just as interesting, just as loving as I am. And I have no reason to criticize them. And then Candace says that black people are the only community who lift their worst. And you have to understand, people who love Candace and goes, this is a black woman speaking on black issues. She's been there. Candace is not of the culture. I need you to understand that. Meeting a Brazilian in America, born and raised in America, is not the same as meeting a Brazilian who was born in Brazil, raised in Brazil, only lived in Brazil. That is kind of what I'm giving you when I tell you about Candace. She was born in the culture. She became bitter. She's not really of the culture. I watched an interview with her and Joe Rogan where she said she was a huge Jay-Z fan. Everything he said was church, and she understands everything he comes from, being a drug dealer from Queens. If you are of the culture, you would never say Jay-Z is from Queens. There is nobody of black culture who listens to hip hop, who grew up or listened to Jay-Z, understand Jay-Z is one of our most notable people. We know plenty about Jay-Z. Some of y'all can say it's a Freudian slip. It is not. No black person would ever say Jay-Z is from Queens. The reason she didn't really know, and she was just saying whatever she was saying, because she's just trying to make you feel like she's of the culture, and and that, you know, that she knows what she's talking about. But no, she's hurt. So I'm not saying don't follow her, but I say take some of the stuff she says with a grain of salt, because she's not one of us. She's not speaking from a place of knowledge whenever she's speaking to you. She says that black people hold up their worst. And George Floyd represented one of our worst because he was, I guess, a career criminal. She did all this research on him. There has never been a George Floyd Awards. There is an NAACP Image Awards where black people come together, get dressed, and it's on TV every year where black people lift their best. They're most educated, they're most, you know, the ones who do the most philanthropy, all of it. Like, we hold up our best every year. Steve Harvey does the Neighborhood Awards where we celebrate some of our best but overlooked around the country. We don't have a Criminals Awards. We don't have a Black People's Worst Awards. That's not a thing that happens. We don't celebrate our worst. But even if we did, to say that no other race of people celebrate their worst while living in America, while being black, is the most ridiculous thing I've ever heard in my life. There are slave owners on our money. On our money are slave owners. There are monuments resurrected in their honor. There are streets named after them, cities named after them. There are sculptures made after them all over the country. Not only slave owners, but people who fought to keep slavery alive. There are monuments named after them, buildings named after them. So to say that other races of people, other cultures of people do not celebrate their worst is ridiculous. We still have Columbus Day. Even though we all know that the story of Christopher Columbus is a complete farce, we still celebrate the sham that is Thanksgiving and teach children about Pilgrims and Native Americans, even though Native Americans in this country have almost been completely wiped out and their land stolen. So to say that we don't celebrate our worst in America is ridiculous. And saying that black people are the only ones that do it, you know, black people aren't the only people who deal with inequality, and I need black people to understand this too. We're fighting for our stuff, but we're going to have to get around to help our Native American brothers and sisters and make sure that they're heard too, because a genocide happened with them too, and they're not being heard. The fact that there is a Washington Redskins and Cleveland Indians team, and Washington Redskins is represented by our nation's capital, and Native Americans everywhere has told everybody that that is a racial slur, and they hate it with every part of their being. And the owner gets to look them in the face and say, so the fuck what? means we still got work to do, not just in the black community. Bigotry is wrong across the board. Across the board. But those of you who listen to Candace Owens, you're not paying attention. She was ridiculous in mostly everything she said. She said that police brutality is a myth. Is a myth. Like Bigfoot. Like the Loch Ness Monster. It's a myth. Even though you can find black people all over the world, who can tell you countless times and countless experiences of people in their life or them personally who have been brutalized by the police. I got 3 stories myself, 1 for me, 2 for my father that I witnessed. I think it is wrong and completely insensitive for a group of people to tell you about their experience, and then you go back and grab a chart that you pulled off the internet and say that this chart disagrees with you, and this chart that I haven't done any of the research on, that I don't know who even made the chart. I believe this chart more than I believe your experiences, even though you have bodies, names, experiences, stories, witnesses to corroborate what you're saying. I cannot listen to you because of this chart. To discount what people have been through just because of something you Googled that you have no idea whether it's true, plus was made by the same system that the people are complaining about. Understand this, Candace. Whenever you put out there into the world that black people are more criminal, do you ever think to maybe that when you say black people are more criminal, that goes like hand in hand with the fact that black people say that they are judged unfairly? See, because the charts that you're getting shows people who, were found guilty of these crimes. But if you just do the research, that you'll see that black people are more likely to be convicted for a crime than any other people. So they go to jail more than any other people. It doesn't count the times that people were accused and got off, or accused and they had a good lawyer and got off, which is not the case in the black community. Most black people are represented by a public defender. And there's many documentaries of black people going to jail for crimes they didn't commit. Black people being in jail for years without ever even having a day in court. There's a whole prison right now that you can look up where everybody in the prison was in there for years and never saw their court date. You can just do the research and see that. That is a thing that happens. All right. We never got to see if they were innocent or guilty. They just was rotting in prison. That's a thing that happens. It doesn't take you long to research these things. You're choosing not to research these things. And it's disheartening. It's disheartening. You're putting out terrible information and people are sucking it up because you're bitter. You're hurt that the black community calls you a coon and they call you an Uncle Tom. But what you're doing in your bitterness is putting out a bunch of stuff that makes the same people who hate people who look like you say, look, I told you we're right. Even one of them says that about them. And it justifies their bigotry. That's what you're doing. You're not helping anybody by doing that. The best way to understand where people come from or what they deal with is to talk to them about it. To understand. There's no Google. There's no charts. There's no numbers that's going to tell you somebody's pain. It's not going to tell you somebody's experience. No matter how you feel about George Floyd, the people are all around the world are feeling a certain way because of how disgusting it was. But many black people jump up whenever stuff like that happens because it happens often. And now while we have everybody's attention and they see that it happens, we go, look, now you see what they're doing? Now that you have an example, let me tell you about the pain I've been experiencing. Let me go out in the streets and march, because this isn't a one-time thing for us. But she wanted to focus on George Floyd and his past and all these things. George Floyd is the name of today. Of today. It was Breonna Taylor yesterday. It was Ahmaud Arbery the day before. The names are constantly interchangeable, but the brutality is the same. And that's what we have an issue with. For you to not understand that and to put that out into the world is really irresponsible. Really irresponsible. And then she said, what black people have to do is limit their interactions with the police. Okay, we can do that, but if you just look up the stop and frisk numbers in states that institute stop and frisk, you'll realize that the police purposely target black and Latinos to stop and frisk. They do not stop and frisk white people. There aren't any white people on this live that will see this video that can tell you, yeah, I remember walking down the street one time and the police just stopped me and frisked me to see if I had anything on me without any, reason to do so. You can't. But there are tons of blacks, there are tons of Latinos that can tell you that that is their experience. But even if I don't pay attention to what a chart says or anything, just ask people and they will gladly tell you. But okay, you want me to limit my interaction with police. Cool, I can do that. How about I sit on my couch in my apartment eating ice cream and a cop like Amber Geiger comes in to my apartment and shoots me like she did Botham Jean. Did he not do what was necessary? Did he not do what was necessary to avoid the police? Tamir Rice, kid playing with a toy gun at a park. Cop pulls up, kills him in seconds. 11 years old, I believe. Should he have done a better job of not putting himself in position to run into the police because he was playing with something that was sold in stores, that's sold in Walmarts everywhere? What should he have done exactly? Sean Bell, the day before his wedding, when the cops shot into his car 50-some times, what was he supposed to do? What was he supposed to do to limit his interaction with the police? You see, people who want to find a reason not to believe you and your experiences will find any reason to doubt your experiences. But we as a people entirely have to be better than that. Talk to your brothers and sisters in this country and ask them what they've been through. And if what they go through makes you feel uncomfortable, then stand with them to change that. Don't deny their experiences just because you don't know what it's like to go through that. I feel like if you can hear everything that I just said, I've given you examples. I've given you nothing but facts. And you can still look at me and go, he don't know what he's talking about. He's wrong. The problem isn't him. The problem, is him. Whatever you want to do, whatever excuse you want to come up with. Understand that you are definitely part of the problem and need to do some soul searching. And that's okay, but you need to identify that. because you're not helping anybody by finding every reason not to help people.